So slide number 7 is where we did leave off. And it was talking about that weird force called the normal force. Right? So out of all of them, this is the most confusing of them. I'll give you that. Right? Because we just don't take into account. We're just like, yeah, like it's there. Like I know that I'm not being sucked through the table or sucked through the floor. I'm not like being pulled straight down into the center of the earth. Even though that is where our earth or our gravity is pulling us towards, right? Something is stopping us. So if I'm standing on the floor, then it's the floor that's stopping me from being sucked through. Right now, you guys are all in a chair or a stool. So it's the stool that is keeping you from being pulled through, right? Gravity's pushing you down. Something has to be pushing you up because otherwise gravity would just pull you to the center of the earth.
And you would die.
You would.
No.
That would be a problem.
Yeah.
Okay? So this only happens when two solid objects are in contact. So if something is in free fall, like my book, it's going to stay in free fall until it reaches another solid, and then the normal force will pick up. So if something is floating, it can't be experiencing normal force. You have to ask yourself, is there contact between two solids? A solid and a solid, now there'll be normal force. Otherwise, gravity is pulling down and maybe like air resistance or friction is working against it, but normal force would not be. Yes?
So, if there wasn't something from stopping us going to the middle of Earth, would everything just get sucked in?
Yeah. That's why normal force is so important. The other part of normal force is that it's not stronger than gravity. If it was, what do you think would happen? If normal force pushing up is stronger than the force pushing down of gravity?
Yeah, well, we'd be able to jump really high.
Maybe. What do you think, Landon?
Float in space and
We would be floating, right? We could levitate. So if normal force was able to push stronger than gravity, well, we would like float. Like this book would just be like levitating above the table. Normal force would be so strong, it's winning, it's beating gravity. As it's sitting here, they're equal. Basically like an equal arrow of gravity pushing down and an equal arrow of normal force pushing up. Those two forces balance, and we'll talk more about that later, but those forces balance and we get no change in motion. So this is going to stay the way it is because those forces basically cancel each other out.
This is probably a dumb question, but like for like a swimming pool, would like just the like sometimes I float and I feel like I'm dead or something.
Okay.
I just like sink sometimes.
All right. So there's something called buoyancy, and so that's what's at work there. So like you can make yourself float, or you can like if you get like real small or you take out a big breath, you can like start to sink, right? So you can change the amount of air in your lungs, and that acts as almost like a floater in a way. So if you're full of air, you know what I mean? Like you can get yourself to float. If there is a body and like it's seriously like literally dead weight, right? Then it is going to be able to be pulled down. So don't confuse buoyancy with normal force. It's a whole different kind of force involved because there's a lot of things at work, but I get what you're saying. Yeah. And let's face it, water is not a solid. It's technically a liquid. It's not a gas, but it's not a solid either. So that's why normal force, you can always just ask yourself, is it between two solids that are touching? If the answer is yes, then you are going to have normal force.
I guess.
Well, you should have already had this from yesterday, but yeah, go ahead. Brady?
If you had a strong enough fan and like it was keeping the book from levitating, would that be from like drag?
That was keeping it from levitating or causing it to? Yeah, so like an air, like a air hockey table, you know how like there's little holes and there's air shooting out of it? It actually causes the puck to just barely float above the surface of the table. So it's kind of doing that. Basically, it is kind of beating gravity just a little bit. And that causes it to basically reduce that friction, so it kind of acts like it's on ice where it's real slick and there's no friction, which is something that we'll talk about later. So that's a great idea, yeah.
About the dead weight, wouldn't the body balloon?
Eventually it would if it's in there long enough.
So like, the thing that you use to like practice skydiving, that like, I don't know what.
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't know if I ever knew the name of that, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, what about that?
So basically, that is causing enough friction or air resistance that it is kind of beating gravity. It's giving you that lift. So it's not that gravity has changed, but you've increased the force that's working against it in that situation. Yep. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So like I said, the normal force is the most odd, but really if you think about it, it's why we're not getting sucked through the ground or the seat or the thing that's keeping us like in contact with the solid. And it's also the reason why we're not floating and levitating, right? It's not stronger than gravity, okay? So one thing, normal force is special, and he said it gets its name because it works perpendicular. So what happens if you are on a hill and you're walking? How does it feel like you're being pulled? Raise your hand if you can describe that feeling if you're walking up a steep hill. Which way do you feel like you're being pulled? Are you being pulled up or are you being pulled down?
Down.
Yeah, you feel like you're being pulled down. And the reason why is if this is my hill and this is me, right? My normal force is like this, right? It's working perpendicular to my surface. So it's like this. But which direction is gravity working? Straight down. So if we go back, here's my normal force and here's gravity. Well, guess what? Those don't perfectly cancel each other out. So actually it seems like gravity is stronger. It seems like it's winning because normally normal force and gravity would be canceling each other out and you would just feel like nothing. But if you're on the hill and normal force is perpendicular to that, you're losing some of that normal force to cancel out gravity. So that's why you feel like you're falling backwards, right? This even happens like if my center of gravity is here, okay? If I change that center of gravity is gonna eventually, I have to catch myself or I'm gonna fall, right? So it's kind of that same idea. Not all of my normal force is able to cancel out gravity if you're on a hill, if you're going uphill or downhill, right? Either way, it kind of works the same way. So if I am, straight up and down, like my forces are canceling out. But if I lean, then it changes where gravity is pulling. And if I don't adjust that, I'm gonna fall, okay? And we mentioned that last unit a little bit too. Okay, so everybody should have 7 filled in. Let's take a look at another very common force. So normal force is going to be in existence as long as it's between 2 solids that are in contact. Applied force, you've also seen this in the pictures identified as thrust or movement, is the outside force that is exerted or applied to an object, and it usually causes the object to move. This is basically our push or our pull that is involved in motion. So it's when you actually see somebody pushing or you actually see somebody pull. That's an applied force. I'm applying a force to get that object to move or trying to get it to move. So a child pulling a wagon down the road. The wagon has a force being applied to it. If the applied force is stronger than the forces resisting, like friction, motion will occur in the direction of that applied force. So I can push as hard as I want against this wall. I mean, I'm strong, really strong, but I'm not going to be able to move that wall, right? So I can push as hard as I can. I'm applying a force, but there's something called static friction that's actually stronger, the connection between the floor and the wall, that I can't overcome, all right? So that is going to be an issue. So not every time that you apply a force are you going to see motion occur. Most of the time, yes, but not all the time.
Is it true if you rub your hand on the wall enough, it'll go through the wall?
I don't think so.
So like, we get a really big shock, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure, maybe if there's something else that you're not including or you're forgetting in that situation?
Maybe your hand against like a table or something, and it'll just face you on.
Basically, like if you're saying the friction of that will wear it away, I mean, you'd need, probably you'd wear your hand out before you would wear the wall out.
So like, if you rub it enough.
To catch it on fire?
No, like, your hand, you rub it enough, and it
Could we
just.
just move on?
No, I mean, there'd be some things that could happen, but you're not gonna, like, friction can cause heat. If you have enough heat, you can cause fire. That could do it. But you're not gonna wear those molecules away. You would probably end up wearing your skin away before you would the wall or the table. Yes?
You rub your hand up with your hand was skin.
Would it what? Incinerate?
Yeah.
Hypothetically, if you could rub it fast enough and long enough, possibly. Yeah. Okay, yes.
I've seen this thing, like, what David's kind of saying, that, like, it was like this haircut place, and where the chair is, where they always walk, it, like, made footprints because they walked on it so much.
Okay, and so I mean, like, this is happening like long term. It's no different than like erosion where water will wear a path, right? Eventually those molecules will, but I mean, it's a very long process. And like, what you were saying with your hand, like, whatever's more fragile or breakable is probably gonna be what wears first. So if you have your hand, just like if you have an uncomfortable or new pair of shoes, your shoes aren't gonna get the hole, you're gonna get a blister or a cut on your heel, right? Because your skin's more fragile than the material of the shoe, right? But good, I like the way you guys are thinking. And remember how we talked about the net force, right? The sum of all of our forces? We can combine and look at all of these forces to kind of determine where is the motion going to take place. Is it gonna be right, left, up, down, like, what direction is going to show that force? So we need to look at how strong the forces are, and if we're using arrows, it's like how big are those arrows? Are they long, are they fat, are they short, are they skinny? And then what direction? And just like that brain pop showed, forces can cancel out to a net force of 0 if the forces working opposite each other are equal. So the gravity pulling down was balanced by the air resistance or drag working up. When those balanced out, they didn't get any change in their motion. They were still moving, but there was no change. Like, they weren't accelerating, they weren't speeding up downward anymore. They'd reached a constant. And so we'll look at this a little bit more, and we have a whole unit on this next year too, where we get into some of the more specifics of this. But what I need you to know this year is that those are called balanced forces. You hear the explanation in the definition, right? It's dealing with equal forces, balanced forces. They're just in opposite directions. So it's like, I think maybe, David, you mentioned tug of war yesterday. If you have equal pull to the right, equal pull to the left, you're gonna be like a stalemate. You're gonna be like, ooh, like nobody's winning. You're tied, you're balanced. Right now, if somebody jumps in and starts helping this side, they add more force, then you unbalance the forces and you're gonna get a change in the direction of that stronger force. Did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Brady?
What if the guy on the outer side absolutely red when he's tire on the rim that's pointing?
It'd be the same thing,
And then he starts pulling, and they all lose.
Okay, well, so there's all kinds of different variations to the scenario. Equal strengths in opposite directions will always balance out. If you have an unbalanced force, where you have one that's stronger than the other, no matter how that happens, then the motion will go in the direction of the stronger force. It's very logical, right? So just think about, and the one thing that's nice about this unit is that we experience forces all the time, so we are very comfortable understanding real life situations. So with balanced forces, if all the forces are balanced by equal forces moving in opposite direction, the object will maintain its current motion. And so it's not that it doesn't move, it's just it's not changing, and that's the key. So both the speed and the direction will stay the same if the forces are balanced. And a lot of times that's what confuses people. They're like, well, if it's balanced, then it can't be moving. Well, if the forces are balanced, then you're just not changing. You're not speeding up or you're not slowing down. So it's kind of very specific when we're talking about that in terms of science.
So like the button on the steering wheel where you press it and
Oh, the cruise control.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. You are on cruise control if the forces are balanced. So if you're moving and forces are balanced, then it's like you're on cruise control. You're not speeding up or slowing down. Very good.
In some cars, when you go down hills, they like change to like a higher gear
Mm-hmm.
for at least the automatic.
Yeah. Okay, so if the object is not moving, then it's gonna remain not moving. Sorry, lost my mouse. There we go. If the object is moving, it will continue moving in the same, or at the same speed and in the same direction. So like Landon said, this would be like the cruise control. This unit is all about logic, common sense. Think about your own experiences with things, okay? So if they're balanced, it's not going to move. It's not, if it's not moving to start with, right? So if it's staying still and balance forces are acting on it, it's gonna keep staying still. If it's moving and forces are balanced, it's gonna continue moving, just like that video showed when they were in the airplane, that their speed was the same. They were on cruise control, right? They were not changing even though they were moving. So, sometimes it does get a little confusing because you're like, well, if they're moving, then it should be something that's changing. But if it's on cruise control, that is a constant, that's staying the same. Yes?
God, I was gonna say.
Uh-oh, he lost it. Lost it. Okay, so this has a special name, and it was hinted in that video, inertia. And it is a very weird word, it's one of your vocab terms. So inertia is a tendency of an object to resist any change in motion. So what this means is that an object is at rest, it's gonna stay at rest. So if it's not moving, it's gonna stay not moving. That's easy enough, like my desk here, my table is at rest, it's gonna stay at rest unless something causes it to move. So unless I apply a force to move it, or move it back. Otherwise, it's gonna stay there, okay? If an object is in motion, it's gonna tend to stay in motion. You're like, well, if I kick a ball, it's not gonna roll forever, it's eventually gonna stop, right? But what's making it stop? What's acting on it to slow it down?
Inertia and little sliding wheels.
This is number 11. So, inertia is acting on everything, but that's not what's making it slow down. What causes something to slow down? Friction, right? Which is what we're going to get into next week. So, if you get rid of friction, would it just go forever? It should. Do we have any situations really here on Earth where that happens? Not a lot. There's one that's really similar to removing friction. Can anybody think about it? It happens a lot in winter.
Wouldn't we skipping a rock?
Nope.
Oh, a car on ice.
How about anything on ice?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Because you lose that traction, you lose that friction. So it's basically like, that's why if you're ice skating or you're even just walking on a sidewalk that's icy, and you're like, well, it's easy to stop if you're in motion. Like, I'm walking, okay, I stop, that's not a big deal. You kick a ball, it rolls, eventually it's gonna stop. I push this book, it's gonna eventually stop. Like, I didn't have any fear that it was gonna go flying off and just continue forever, right? But friction causes it to stop because we have friction all around us. Ice reduces friction so much that something is just gonna keep on moving. So if I'm on ice, I'm ice skating, and I wanna stop, is it as easy for me to stop as it is here on the ground? Oh, right? I have a hard time stopping on ice. So if I'm moving and I want to stop, that's not easy to do when I'm on ice. All right, so I think that the at rest one is easy to picture. I think that this one is a little harder because we have friction all around us. So we're like, yeah, of course things stop. Duh, they're not going to go on forever. But if we produce a situation where there's no friction or very little, then something will continue forever. Space, there's no friction, and ice. Those are situations where like it's very, very similar to having no friction, okay?
Just turn sideways really sharply. Alright.
Right, if you have skis on, or if you have skates on. But like if I just have shoes and I'm walking down the sidewalk that's icy, and I go to turn, I'm just gonna keep sliding sideways, right?
Until you
So-
get Marlin, then you're gonna fall.
Okay, so if you watch this little demonstration, look at the ladder. The truck experiences a stop, but the ladder didn't get the memo, did it? It just is gonna keep on going if it's not tied down. Now, if I tie it down, then it's gonna do what the truck does. It's gonna stop. But if that ladder is not secured, it doesn't get the memo, hey, we stopped. So it's gonna keep going. What eventually makes it fall?
Gravity.
Gravity, right? It loses that normal force, so gravity wins and starts pulling it down. Finish up this slide. More mass means more inertia because it takes more force to stop that motion. And we'll pick back up with this on Monday,
See you later.
okay?
More force to change.
I thought inertia was like a doozy.
Yeah, me too. Have a good weekend.
You too.
How was your day?